Welcome to Keeping the Beat, an engaging web series hosted live by TNMEA in partnership with the CMA Foundation. Tune in weeknights, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays at 8, 7 Central to learn from and interact with music professionals from around the globe representing every facet of the vast world of music. Today is June the 4th, 2020. My name is Tim Rhea. I'm the Director of Bands and Music Activities at Texas A&M University. Joining me this evening is my wife, Jennifer, who will assist me with any questions that you might submit this evening. Tonight, I will be talking to you about things I have learned along the way, which will address various topics and ideas that I've come across during my 28 years of teaching and conducting bands. We want to say a special word of thanks to our school program supporters, particularly the CMA and the CMA Foundation, Metro Nashville Arts Commission, and Tennessee Arts Commission. These programs would not be possible without their investment in music education. Please be sure to check the final slide of today's PowerPoint presentation for a complete list of our supporters. I encourage you to interact by replying to this live video stream with your questions and comments, which we will respond to throughout the hour. One disclaimer, while this is being streamed live, it will remain on Keeping the Beat Facebook page for future reference. So as such, your comments will also remain a part of the archive. So now that I've done the official stuff, now we will go into my own stuff. I'm so pleased to be with you today. I know that over the last 10 weeks that most of us have been Zoomed to death and have gone through lots and lots of these presentations and things. I know that I was talking earlier to Jennifer. I have had pretty much a minimum of about 5 Zoom meetings a day. So when I was asked to do this, instead of doing a presentation that's going to be a lot of PowerPoints and all those other kind of things, what I did is I kind of went back to a clinic that I'd done several times before. I think all of us in this profession are very grateful to mentors and people that have helped us. And particularly when I was a young band director, and even still, I have always tried to learn everything I can from the people that I really look up to in our profession. My background is a little bit different. I grew up in a little small town in East Texas called DeKalb. There were 2,000 people there. My parents still live there, have been there for 50-something years. As a matter of fact, I'm actually going to get to see them next week for the first time since New Year's because of all the travel restrictions and everything that are going on. But it was a wonderful place to grow up. It kind of reminds you of being in Mayberry, if you ever watched the Eddie Griffith show. It's one of those places that when you're growing up there, you thought it was just the greatest thing that could happen. Then after you get away from it for a while and see the real world, you think, how did I survive? You know. But anyway, after I finished my schooling there in Texas, and my whole life has been spent in Texas except 4 years when I was in undergraduate school. I attended the University of Arkansas, where I had a band director named Eldon Jansen. He was an absolutely wonderful director of bands. Eldon is 92 years old now, still alive. We still stay in very close contact. He was like a second father to me and taught me so much. Eldon, before he spent 25 years as the director of bands at the University of Arkansas, had a wonderful career in the public schools of Texas. So he brought with him, when he taught us, because we're all music education students, he taught us the real nuts and bolts of how to be a band director. It was a really, really wonderful thing. He was a very organized man. He was wonderful when he rehearsed the ensemble, and he was very, very good at teaching us professionalism and how to treat people. So that was a wonderful experience. And then I left there and went straight to Texas Tech University, came back to Texas, did my master's degree in conducting with a wonderful man named Jim Sutta. Jim had a totally different way of doing things when I went to school at Texas Tech. Jim, he was a fabulous musician. He was a wonderful piano player, could sit down and open the score to the Persichetti Symphony and play it for you. And I also have a big piano background, so we used to do a lot of piano duets and stuff in our lessons and stuff, which made for a lot of fun. But Jim was also a really good arranger and composer. So the way that he taught me was very different than the experience I had at Arkansas. And things were just approached different. So it was great to have those two different experiences. I spent a year teaching public schools in Texas, down in the Houston area. And then I came to Texas A&M University, my second year to teach. And I have been here, this is my 28th year. And I'm director of bands and music activities. A&M is one of the largest schools in the country now. We have 70,000 students. The band program is very, very large. The way that it works here, everything is, the ensembles are grouped together in a music activities section, which are all the bands, orchestras, and choirs. And I'm head of that department. And about 1,300 students that play in our groups here. I conduct the Wind Symphony, which is our top of our 4 concert bands, and I'll still oversee our marching band, because the marching band is such an important thing here at Texas A&M University, both for the experience that it gives our students and for the public relations tool that it is to Texas A&M University. So my degrees were in music education, and then I have a conducting degree, and then I have my doctorate is actually in conducting and also composing and arranging. I spent a lot of time in the beginning of my career cashing in on the marching band arranging side of things. So during my undergraduate degree and my graduate degree, I did a whole lot of that, not only for my college band, but for high school bands all over the place, other college bands, and kept that up even through my first years here at Texas A&M. When I came to Texas A&M, I had to get a doctorate. Of course, it's almost required in collegiate teaching today, and worked out a deal at the University of Houston, which is about a 2-hour drive from College Station. Worked out a deal where I was able to still work full-time at Texas A&M while I was working on my doctorate full-time. When I look back at it, it was 3 of the most intense years of my life, but it was before Jennifer and I were married. And I pretty much worked 24 hours a day to get all of that taken care of, but it was very good. And that was a totally different experience. So I also count among my mentors some really, really wonderful people that we're going to talk about a little bit later. Much like you, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, we all, for the last 10 weeks, have kind of had our world turned upside down for all of us in the music world. I had a concert with my Wind Symphony the last Friday evening of February to include the Maslanka Symphony No. 10, which we're in the consortium that commissioned that piece. David was here just shortly before he died on our campus and worked with our students. So it was that spring, and then he passed that summer. And so he was writing the piece at the time. So the students that were freshmen in that Wind Symphony were seniors when we played this piece. So it was a very, very emotional thing for us. And it was one of those performances that we'll always remember. And then as soon as that was over, we had a rehearsal Monday morning, and then I left town on Tuesday to go to some conventions and to do some guest judging, all that stuff. And I was supposed to be out of town for 10 days. And by the time I came back to College Station after 10 days, the world was a different place. I was flying back actually from North Dakota, and 2 days later, I would not have been comfortable to get on a plane and go anywhere. So part of the real sad part for me was I never got to see my students again after that last rehearsal. We went online like so many of the rest of the people did. And it's very interesting as we think about the situation that we're right in now with music and music education. I have been able to visit with my students on Zoom and some things, but the main thing they talk about is how much they miss music and how isolated they feel, going to school on a computer. So I think right now music making is such an important thing that we can bring back into their life, and hopefully as soon as possible. Here in Texas, we're kind of starting to reopen and everything, and plan to have school here this fall, and ensembles. We're just trying to figure out how to make that work. So what I want to talk about for these next few minutes is things that I have learned as I've gone through my career, and mainly it's all stolen from other people. Everything that you get into your toolbox that will make you better as a teacher, better as a conductor. And many of these things that we're going to talk about this evening could actually be a full clinic. And I hope that for any of this stuff that may be of interest to you, maybe you will take a little more time to find out a little bit more in some of these areas as you go through. And again, everything that I'm going to talk about tonight, these are all opinions, and these are how I do things and how other people have taught me to do things. This does not at all mean this is the correct way to do them in every situation. And I'm also really big on the fact that you have to make everything that you're on as you go through. but just some general comments regarding music education in general that have really, really worked for me, not only teaching here, but also in my career in the public schools. And I spend a whole lot of time in the public schools now. I do lots of honor bands. I do lots of clinics. I really enjoy doing that. So my big thing for music education is our goal of music education should be to help students become musically independent. And when I say that, that they're going to want to continue to play their horns, to support arts, to make very, very good musical decisions as we go through. Probably earlier in my career, I was probably guilty of thinking that I had to micromanage absolutely everything that my ensembles did. You know, they had to play exactly like I wanted. I was going to tell them how to interpret things, all that. I think part of that was from my being young and not having the confidence to really trust them. As I've grown older, I trust my students completely. They sometimes have better musical ideas about things than I do. So I think it's very, very important that we make sure that our number one goal is to help them become musically independent, and that at some point as they progress as musicians, they need us less and less and less. And I think that's a really good thing. I think another thing that I figured out pretty quick with the help of some other people is we always have to strive to find multiple ways to solve the same problem, because the answer is not always the same for every student or every ensemble. You know, we have different ensembles even here at A&M, and standing in front of the Wind Symphony is not like standing in front of the concert band. You have students that have different skill levels. You have students that have different backgrounds. When I go out and I do honor bands or work with high school bands, not all the students are at the same level. And so what you can say to one person may not be what you need to say to another person. What I've really observed from going out and observing really, really fine teachers is they have multiple ways to solve that same problem. And they have a way that that student understands what it is that they're wanting to do. I think there are three things that make up a great conductor: personality, organization, and musicianship. And I think you have to have all of those things. Uh, Students are going to play if they're really inspired, you know. Uh, and I think part of our personality is, yes, we have to and keep order in our rehearsals and all that, but we have to inspire our students with our personality. We also have to make absolutely sure that they know what the expectations are through our organization and what's happening. And when I say organization, I think part of that is being careful with their time too. You know, the thing that I've noticed in students through my years of teaching, when I first started teaching at the college level, is this: our students were very dedicated to two or three things. They wanted to be, wanted to be academically successful. They wanted to be musically successful, and then they may have something else they're doing. As the students have progressed through my time, they seem to be wanting to be involved in everything. They want to be president of the student government. They want to be in the band. They want to do all these different things. So I think it's very, very important that we really are organized. We really know what we want to accomplish in our rehearsals, and we have a set of goals. And then, of course, musicianship. How can you not have that and be a wonderful conductor? And to me, a conductor is more than somebody that waves a baton. A conductor is a teacher. Great conductors have a passion for what they do. They have confidence in their ability, and there's a total difference between confidence and arrogance. And I can say this because I've been doing a long time. We've got plenty of arrogance in our profession. We don't need all of that. What we all need to do is to work together. And then when I was talking about personality, that's an electricity on the podium, regardless of their approach. And I think we all know now, when you think back to conductors of the old age, we all think of maybe the conductors that were a little bit of the Toscanini, the tyrant kind of folks and everything. That doesn't work with students anymore. You know, that this is a different student, and we have to figure out how to connect with those. We've got to get them to buy into what we're doing, and they won't let you down. You know, I don't remember the last time, and you know, when you think about your earlier career, and I think about my earlier career, I wish I'd been kinder sometimes than what I was earlier in my career. And some people told me that too. I would have a concert, And we would have everything really worked up. And this is back in the days when I probably overdid it a little bit too much, you know, and I had everything just like I wanted to do. And something in the concert, some minute something would happen. Somebody would come in a half beat, and I would react to that during a concert. And the student would just almost close down in fear, you know, and then it just would become worse and worse and worse as it went through. When I finally learned to trust them and understand that there was going to be a minor something in probably any concert you did, it totally changed my world as I went through. A little bit about competition. I've always said compete with yourself. I will have to admit, because I grew up in Texas, I was a very, very competitive person coming through high school, coming through college, and even my first years of teaching here at A&M. When I finally realized that that was not important, that you teach and prepare your students to be the best they can possibly be, that's all that matters. I think a lot of the time the competition thing, we take it a little bit to excess. Now, I think a little of it is wonderful. You know, you got it, it is motivating. But if everything that we do is based just on the competition, then I think we need to go back and reevaluate that. The thing that we want to make sure we do is a positive musical experience. That's what we're trying to do for all of our students. And with a positive musical experience, your students should become music lovers for life. A few inspirational things, and I have stolen every one of these, and I wish I had written down who I had stolen them from, but I've used them for so long I can't remember anymore. But things that a lot of times I'll say to my students, the value is in the journey, not the destination. In my current career, I enjoy my rehearsals almost more than I do in my performances, because I watch the music evolve. I watch their faces when it all happens right for the first time, or when they see where a phrase peaks and all those other kind of things. So when we get to a performance, and my students are the worst about one little thing happening, and they just think the worst thing has happened. And then we go back and we talk about the journey. So I talked a little bit earlier about the Miss Lanka piece, and we had a very, very fine performance of that. I'm not trying to say we didn't at all, but there were a couple little blips. It's a 35-minute piece that maybe had never happened before, and they were very minor. But I think back 2 days before, when we had a dress rehearsal for the first time, it takes a lot of forces to play that piece. Harps and string basses and celeste and pianos, and we put it all together for the first time, and we played it top to bottom, and they saw what all that did, and the emotion, and that to me was a great musical experience, like one I'll remember forever in my life. So that rehearsal experience to me was actually a better experience than when we played it on the concert, despite the fact how well it went. So we have to remember those things. And my second thing is, great musical moments provide unforgettable experiences. So at the end of every semester here, I always do a survey of my students. And I said, it's got the list of literature that we played. And I say, tell me what pieces really spoke to you and why. And every student that I had, particularly since we had to go on to online, every student that I had, it was that Miss Lanka rehearsal. They just thought it was the greatest thing that had ever happened. So that was a wonderful feeling that all happened like it did. Fear of failure, or I can't read. Fear of failure, just like I just failed, is the single most dangerous hindrance to success. And I spend a lot of time trying to explain to my students that a performance really you shouldn't feel any different at a performance than you do at a rehearsal, you know, because they're so worried they're going to do something wrong sometimes, you know, and trying to overcome that. The best performances I've ever had with my own ensembles are where you have the focus, but you don't have the fear, and you have it right there in the middle, you know, and everything just really gels together. The greatest good you can do for another is not to share your riches, but to reveal to him his own. So you have to, your ensemble, the most important thing about it to me is the experience of those students sitting in front of you. Great band programs are built one player at a time. Destiny is not a matter of chance, it's a matter of choice. And then this one, I've seen this one a whole lot floating around the last 10 weeks as we are dealing with a lot of issues with administrators and all this other stuff. And with Jennifer being an administrator in the public schools, we can talk about these things that are happening. Students do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that is very, very true. We're going to talk a little bit now about rehearsals and how things work. What have you got?
So I got a couple of comments.
Okay, what have you got?
From Julie Hill. She says, beautiful comment, Tim, on the transition from being negative regarding mistakes and shutting kids down to learning to focus on the positives. Rehearsals versus performances. I love it.
Thank you, Julie. That was very kind.
And Edward Freitag says, balance is the key. Competition is great and gives instant feedback, but is not the tail that wags the dog.
Totally agree. Totally agree. That's a very healthy approach to look at it. All right. We're going to go a little bit now into what I feel about for rehearsal. So this is kind of before rehearsal, before you get into rehearsal with your ensemble, some things that you want to consider. So to me, you know, our teaching tool is the literature that we put in front of our ensembles, whatever that is. So we must choose the best literature possible for our ensembles. There are all kinds of sources that you can do with that. Sources for band repertoire, you can read. Everybody has all kinds of lists and stuff. Of course, these days, you know, when I was young, I had every 33 long play record, you know, that the Illinois band and the Michigan band and everybody, I've still got them all. I still play them. That came out. But these days you can get on YouTube and there's such wonderful promotional aids from publishers. It's almost overwhelming. But if you'll really take some time to shift through some of that stuff, there's some really, really great stuff. Discuss, you know, your conventions and colleagues, and then study. Own scores and study them. You need to know music besides just the pieces that you're playing. What do you want to do in the future with your ensemble? What are some great pieces that you just need to know to become a better musician yourself? You know, certain musical compositions may be of exemplary quality, but they may not be appropriate for your ensemble. So you have to know to make those decisions. And music does not necessarily have to be highly complex to be worthy. Your personal taste should be considered in the selection process. And good music equals excellent construction and genuine expressiveness. It should be of high quality musicality, intellectual, technically, and emotionally. Programming should also be taken into consideration the sometimes wide gap between composers and audiences. I am at a place where I fortunately have an ensemble that can play just about anything that I want to play. And I'm also a very traditional person as well, but I play a lot of new music as well here, you know. And I think the whole thing is a nice blend of what's going on. If you think about the symphonies play a nice blend of Beethoven and Schubert and all of the other kinds of music, but they also play contemporary music as well. What you have to be very, very careful of doing is playing things just because everybody else is playing them. I went to a clinic one time, and I believe this was Jim Croft, the longtime band director at Florida State. He was a wonderful guy. And he was talking about programming for band one time. And he said, if you want to really have a high-level program, you play the Dahl Sinfonietta, Music for Prague, and the Hinema Symphony all on the same concert, and advertise that's what you play. He said, you'll have plenty of parking in the parking lot. No, but those are all wonderful pieces, and I would love to have all those on the same concert. But I try to think about the audience that I play to. We've done Prague here several times, and of course, because of the heritage of this school, it goes great, you know. But I'm very careful about what I put around it. At the same time, I'm going to have some kind of festive overture. I put a march on every concert I play, mainly because of where I grew up in East Texas, mainly because I think they teach my students lots of things. I did a march clinic at Midwest this past December that I would be happy to share a handout with you on march interpretation and those kind of things. But particularly, you know, if you're in the public school, you want everybody to support your program. So think about what you can do that also helps your program, but also educate your kids at all times. Because we have a lot of good music that's out there for us. We also have some that's not quite as good. So you guys know most of this about practical things, the basic things that you want to have in your music. I'm not going to go over that. If you want me to actually have those things listed for you, please feel free to email me. I'll be happy to send you my thoughts on all that stuff. The one thing that I will say is have the highest expectation of each of your players and go with the assumption they're going to be able to do it. If you go with the assumption and you start with, there's no way that they can do this, then you're not saying the right thing. You know, you have to, it's up to us as educators to devise a way to teach them to be able to do that. It is that starting something slower and then inching it up to a faster tempo. Is it having a sectional? Whatever it is, but have the highest expectations of your players to get something done. Also, be able to model what you want musically from your students. And I'm not saying you have to be able to pick up the trumpet and the trombone and the piccolo and play all the parts to the pieces, but you need to be able to count or sing, and you need to be able to sing it in pitch, not on a different pitch than the music examples you want, so that they can understand what proper style is like. You need to study your scores and internalize the music. I watch so many when I go to, particularly when I judge, I'm amazed at these band directors that have spent several weeks working on a piece of music and never look out at the score the entire time they're conducting the ensemble. It's almost like they're afraid to make a mistake. When I was particularly in my conducting, when I was being taught, there was always this thing about, do you memorize or you don't memorize? One of my favorite things ever, the wonderful conductor Bruno Walter, he never memorized his scores and everything. And I can't remember, I guess it was, used to do the Berlin Philharmonic forever. I'm sorry, his name escapes me, but everything was memorized. And they asked Walter one time, they said, well, why don't you memorize your scores? He said, simple, I can read music. So it's one of those things where I was always taught, you know, if something happened and the score fell off the stand, you should be able to still continue with the piece. At the same time, if something happens in that ensemble that's never happened before, that kind of jostles your memory for just a second and would make you do something to get out of a meter or something like that, you might want to just look down for 1 second just to check yourself and have reassurance. But make sure you know that score. Schulte says, you cannot be a first-class conductor unless you know the score in the greatest detail. After all, a conductor must be a teacher first and foremost. How can you teach something you do not know yourself well? I think that's a wonderful quote. Make sure you are prepared to share information about the composition and the composer with your ensemble. And you should make music theory and music history a regular part of your rehearsal. It shouldn't be something separate. It should all be integrated because you're trying to build a total musician, right? Through your score study, you want to make absolutely sure you identify issues before you get into the rehearsal. Your ensemble is only going to sound as good as the individual players can play their parts. So you need to go through each of those individual parts so you know what they're going to encounter, you know. A lot of people there's all kinds of different approaches to score study. I have a really large piano background, and I'm able to sit down and can play through scores. But at the same time, I didn't want to get so dependent on that I couldn't go through and hear what was going on in my head, intervals and all those other kind of things when we went through. So I have a habit of, when I go through score, of fingering along parts as I'm singing, so I can figure out what I need to do, how we're going to trill this note, what we're going to do, anything that's going to save time, and try to let the students know that in an email, possibly even before we start rehearsing, just so that we have that taken care of. Mark any areas that you're going to encounter problems, and then make sure that you have a solution ready for when you get in there, okay? Another thing that I would say about rehearsals, give your players an opportunity to make a few mistakes before you begin absolutely having to fix everything. You may be surprised, particularly as your players become more advanced, that they can figure out some things. When I read with my own ensemble, if there's somebody that plays something in a wrong key or somebody plays a wrong rhythm or something, I generally just keep right on going because I know that they're good enough players that they're not going to let that happen again. And then I just mentioned the fact if you're a string player, writing bowings or alternate fingerings. The rehearsal environment is set by you. So leadership is by example. You need to be early, you need to be prepared, just exactly what you expect from your students. Don't ask them to all be there at 7 o'clock and you walk in at 7:05. Consider the order of the rehearsal room. I like a very, very clean rehearsal room. The procedures for how you come in, how you come out of the room should be understood by all your students. I like to put the order of the music on the board by the composer name, the Hindemith, the Shostakovich, the Mackey, whatever it is, so that they can start relating those things to who those composers are and what that composer, his style, those different kind of things. Consider playing recordings of great ensembles as the players enter the rehearsal room if you're not having them play or something. And again, start your rehearsals on time. If not everyone is there, start anyway. What I make my students do is if they come in late, they're not allowed to walk into the rehearsal while we're actually playing as we go through. Yes, what you got?
Got a couple of comments.
I'm ready.
Spencer says, love that. Start slow and move forward.
Thank you, Spencer.
Edward says, I have found that focusing with students on actual processes of becoming musically proficient, learning to work as great ensemble members, finding the love and passion that is music, and developing personal systems that create enjoyable practice and rehearsals will lead to incredible performances that will be memorable for everyone. Consequently, taking those students to compete becomes simply another extension of what they do rather than the reason for what they do.
Wonderful.
I love your attitude concerning the experience you want your students to have. Kudos.
Thank you very much. And I think you've got one from Leif.
Right. And Leif Cook asks, Harry Bejan would say, if you can't sing it, you can't teach the students to play it. As a piano player, where does your vocalization play into your teaching?
I sing in front of my band all the time, and I'm sure they wish I would stop because I'm not the best singer in the world, but I'm always on pitch, those kind of things. And luckily I have very, very good pitch. So I'm able to do those kind of things. My students actually didn't know I could play piano until we were working on the Miss Lanka Symphony and the piano player didn't show up. So I just sat down with my score and decided to play the piano part. And so I thought they were going to fall out of their chairs in all honesty. So, but also I think students, Leif, are very timid in the fact that they don't want to sing. And what I learned is if you could get them to hum to start with and get the pitches started on the hum and then move that into the vocal thing, that takes a little bit of the fear out of the way as you go through. Player responsibility, and I think it's very important that the players know what your expectations are. So here are mine. Play with a great tone, in tune, in time, and with great technique. So it's a pretty big responsibility. I expect them to bring musical ideas to the rehearsal. I ask a lot of questions in my rehearsals. I don't want to tell my students absolutely everything. I want to get to the end of something and I want to say, okay, we had some issues in those last 4 bars. What did you guys think was happening there? And they're really good at those kind of things. I also want them to, when we come to the end of something, and I said, well, how did it feel to you? Did we do what the composer asked us here dynamically and those kind of things? And they're the first ones to tell you no. I think you guys all know, and we struggle with this particularly a lot in collegiate rehearsals. Students love to play mezzo forte and louder because it's easier. It's very difficult to play soft and really, really do it well. So we spend a lot of time here working at mezzo forte below. My good friend Paula Kreider, Paula and I have known each other, and if I say this in tape on a tape and she hears it, she may kill me, but I'm gonna go ahead and tell you anyway. Paula and I met when I was 14 years old. She did my first Regent band. And she is one of my closest friends in the world. We talk every week. And Paula is so creative in the way that she does things. And I remember this from when she did my Regent band and we were talking about dynamics. And I remember Paula talking about, most bands don't have dynamics, and dynamics are such a key to great musicality. And Paula said, most bands are either loud or soft. And she talked about if you could come up with 8 dynamics, to begin with, and you start, at triple P, and then you go all the way to triple F, and you put everything in there. And then you number those, put them on the board, double P, P, piano, mezzo piano, all that. Assign them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Teach the students to count 1 to 8 at 8 different dynamic levels, and do it enough times that they realize where that level is. Then have them go back and you say, okay, now we're going to start at letter D in the Della Gioia. And remember what it sounded like when we counted at pianissimo? Let's start there. So that really, really works well as far as expanding dynamic vocabulary. Your players, and this is so much easier today than it was when I was young, on a tuner and a metronome. Everybody's got them on their phone. You know, I'm a big, big believer of when you are working individually to work with a tuner and a metronome. I don't use those a lot in my full band rehearsals because my expectation for my full band rehearsals is that my students come very prepared individually, and then I use that for ensemble issues. Now, if something's really going all over the place, or if we're having a major pitch issue, yes, I may refer to it, but not a lot. But if I was teaching middle school or if I was teaching high school, I would probably approach that in a different way. You know, the better the player is, the more you can get away from that sometimes. Make sure that when your students are practicing at home, they have a music stand and they sit on a chair, not on the side of the bed, leaning over where they're not. You've got to be in the correct posture because air is everything for producing the correct tones. What you got?
Okay, Spencer asks, you may have already discussed this. If not, can you touch on the differences between the cultures of the symphony and the marching band, if any, even though both are comprised of college students? Thank you.
Yeah, so, marching band has evolved so much over the last few years. It's just totally a different animal, particularly in the public schools than when I was young. College marching bands are about entertainment. I mean, that's why we're here, is to entertain. High school, it's a little bit more educationally based than what we do here. We play football games at Texas A&M in a stadium of over 100,000 people. And they want it to be big and loud, and that's what we end up doing. So in high school teaching and the sound that a marching band makes, there really is no difference between the sounds you make in a marching band and a concert band. There's just more of it. It's very easy to go over that really good tone quality very, very quickly. And then all of a sudden you start having all the pitch issues and everything that comes with that. I think if you approach tone production exactly the same 365 days a year, then you're going to be great. If you can learn to do the breathing correctly, the embouchure correctly, and all that kind of stuff, you can get the volume to happen. But you can't get away from tone quality. Tone quality is everything in what we do. It's the basis of everything we do. And if you don't have it, nothing else really matters. Okay? What you got?
Leif asked another question. Can you speak to the role of mentors in your career, separate from musical mentorship, for example, character, inclusion, and work ethic?
Sure, I'll be happy to. A lot of my really good friends are outside of the music industry. I had wonderful parents. I still do. My mom was a kindergarten teacher for 33 years. My dad worked for the government. They gave me a very, very solid grounding and work ethic and what was expected of me. Being raised in that small town like I was, everybody knew everything you did, right or wrong. And if I did anything wrong, particularly at the school, my mom knew about it before the end of the day. My parents were very wonderful in the fact that they laid down the ground rules to us, to me and my brother. And then they set the expectations high. And I always wanted to please my parents. I also had some wonderful teachers in that small town as I grew up. I had a very good education at a small high school. So my work ethic and everything, I think, was really, really established by the time that I got to college. Now, I was like every other college kid. You get freedom that first year. And if you could go back and you could do a few things differently, I probably would choose to go back and do a few things differently as I went through. Most of the people that I hang out with, and have hung out with my career are music people, and not just band people. The people that I'm friends with here, my best friend here now, and it's actually a couple. He was actually in the oil industry for many, many years. His wife is a physical education teacher. I have found myself, and maybe it's because of doing the Aggie marching band, I've been really associated with a lot of sports people, you know, big time. And here at Texas A&M, it's very easy. I had a wonderful guy in our athletic department, our associate athletic director. His name was Mike Caruso. He retired about 3 years ago. I worked with him for 25 years. I watched Mike manage people on a professional level at that huge department over there. I never saw him get upset. I never saw him raise his voice. Our marching band here is tied in to the Corps of Cadets. So the marching band is under that. So I've actually worked for some retired generals on that part of things. So I've learned a lot about managing people. And I remember when I got the job at A&M, I was the associate here for 9 years. I always had the top wind symphony, but the actual head administration of the job and the oversight of the marching band I got. And I remember he was a 2-star Marine general that came to see me and said they were giving me the job. And I said, particularly because everything is set up in such a military fashion with our marching band, I said, tell me the best advice. He says, you need to make decisions with your heart and understand that you can't, there's nothing that works 100% of the time regarding rules. You have to be able to interpret them and fit them in to the people that need those. So I also here had a vice president who just happened to be a 3-star retired Marine general, who is one of my favorite people on the entire planet. And I watched how he led things. And I never, if you met this person, you would never know he was a 3-star Marine general, because he would never say that to you or anything. But the way that he treated people, we would do anything for him if he asked us, just because of the way he treated us. So I think that, you know, a lot of people outside of the music industry really established my work ethic and the relationship that I try to have with people. So I'll get back to this thing, talked a little bit about, let's see, we're going to go past that. A little bit about our daily rehearsal thing. And I'm just going to go through these kind of fast here. You got to have a rehearsal plan every day. You have to treat your ensemble with maturity and respect, and they will respond in the exact same manner. Daily rehearsals should reflect an appropriate balance of music, sight reading, and fundamentals. As I go out across the country, and I am so fortunate that I get to go out and work with lots of wonderful people. It's funny, and I'm going to say this because I'm on here with all of you folks from Tennessee. Some of the most fun I ever had was coming to Tennessee. I got to go down and work with Leif Cook's band one time, and we had a wonderful time. And I came down and did the All-State band. And you guys have one person in that state, Joanne Hood, that is one of the most fun people I've ever met in my entire life. And I hope she gets to see this so that she knows how much respect I have for her. But that was so much fun. Anyway, I just wanted to plug that real quick. But what I am seeing as I go along, particularly because when you do an honor band, people go, well, they've never seen this music before. This is going to be their first time to read it. And it just always scares me to death, because I'm finding out most kids can't sight read. They can't read the rhythms on the page, you know. Now, they're wonderful if I sing it to them. And this is not everyone at all. There's some that are absolutely wonderful. But we got to make sure that our kids, besides being taught music, besides being taught fundamentals, we need to teach them to read too, particularly if they're going to go on into a music career, particularly if they're going to play. It's the people that can sit down and do it really quick that are going to get a whole lot of the gigs. If you really want to see what kind of teacher you are, record and video your rehearsals and look at how much you talk, or if you can follow your own conducting, or what is your conducting conveying to the ensemble. It is eye-opening. It really is eye-opening. Particularly in my younger days, to watch those things. Make sure that your voice is loud enough to be heard, but soft enough that they have to really listen. Stop the ensemble immediately, make your comments, keep them simple. I have figured out that most students have the attention span really of only a few seconds, and then they're off on something else. Try to talk as succinct as possible and play as much as possible. Try to keep your comments positive. Like if somebody plays, it's super out of tune, you're flat. That doesn't even sound good. You're flat. Could you bring the pitch up a bit? It's a bit low. Something like anything you can do to make it positive. I do a thing, and this is how my students really know if they're prepared or not. I conduct from the podium. I teach off of the podium. If the clarinets can't play something, here I come. I get right over there by them. And I say, okay, let's play B to C, as we go through. Then usually I can just walk back to my podium. And when they come to rehearsal the next day, it's taken care of. They've worked on it, or it's a whole lot better. If you're rehearsing musical passages that sound great, you need to work on something else. It's ready to go. We talked a lot about singing. Real big here in Texas. Our bands do a whole lot of singing. Wonderful singing. I'm a big fan of the Bach 16 chorales for band, and there's some bands here in our state that sing those so beautifully before they ever play them. They sing scales and intervals, particularly. It's so helpful, if you can sing the interval, get it in your head, then that really, really helps as you put that to the horn. Also, have people sing. When you're having them sing, don't have everybody sing the same thing. Is it possible to sing 2 lines at the same time? 3 lines, get into a 4-part chorale? Invite students to, I talked a little bit about asking questions. Ask your students, who has the melody? Who has the second most important part? Where is that? Who has the least important part? How long is the phrase? Where's the shape of the phrase? Your rehearsal time is really precious and valuable. Try to find alternate ways of doing anything that's taking away from your music making. I think nearly everybody is doing this these days. When email first came out, it was kind of novel. I don't do announcements or things to my students. I have an email, they know it's coming every Friday. It has, here is what we're working on Monday, here's what we're working on Tuesday, here's what we're working on Thursday, here's things that are coming up. I do everything that way. Now, I may mention a couple of things in rehearsal, but I'm not going to spend 10 minutes that I could be working on a piece of music to go through those things or tell them what's going on. I do want to interact with them, but I don't want to spend a whole lot of that time. Anything that you can do to save time. A wonderful thing that I found out, for a change of pace, try rehearsing a piece from the back and move to the front. Start at the end, get them excited. If you were playing, let's say, Elsa's Procession to the Cathedral, and you were trying to make it through the first treacherous 16 bars, and if any of you guys have ever rehearsed that or sat in a rehearsal, you know that you may not get out of those first 16 bars for 30 minutes if those players don't have it go. Why not start at that big ending of it, get everybody all excited about it, and start working your way back? It doesn't always have to be start at the first bit of it, okay? Another thing that I found out, and I can't remember who I stole this from, when you're starting somewhere, particularly if you're in front of an ensemble that has not numbered their measures and everything, instead of going like, let's start 7 before C, it works a lot better if you go, let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We all count together, and you have everybody in the right place. It just saves time. Never blame your ensemble for your mistakes. They will respect you greatly if you say, I missed the meter change. Let's go back to D for me, please. When your players leave your rehearsal, they should be emotionally exhausted, but they should want to come back. It shouldn't be a negative experience when they walk out. Don't overlook the importance of laughter during your rehearsal. Wonderful keys to success, private lessons, if you possibly can. The better individual players you have, the better your ensembles will be, and sectional rehearsals. If I was teaching in high school, there's no telling how many sectional rehearsals I would do. And particularly if I had lots of time, I would always probably start in some kind of sectional if I had the facilities to do that, and move more to the full band rehearsals, just to identify individual players and help. What you got?
One comment, Edward and Brent both love the idea of teaching off the podium. So comment there.
Gotcha.
And then Leif asked, who are your favorite new composers?
I'm going to talk a little bit about composers, and I have so many composer friends, I'm afraid to mention very many names here because I don't want to offend them. I will tell you this, I will tell you some of the things that we have done here that have been very, very well received by the students and by the audience. And the good thing is Jennifer's sitting right here beside me, and she's my harshest critic. So she can kind of tell me. The music of David Maslanka has an emotional connection with my students that is just immediate. Uh, I don't know, having him here, if you've never got to meet him, he was one of the most beautiful people I ever met in my life. And just the way that all of that connected. The students like playing John Mackey's music. We've done a lot of John's things. Stephen Bryant, we have had really not Stephen Bryant's music. I love Don Grantham. I love Don Grantham, the person. I love Don Grantham's the music. I like working with Don Grantham, you know, as you go through it. I think all those guys have a lot of fresh ideas, you know, as we go through. I'm also a person that I like really fine transcriptions too of music, you know, as we go through. So we kind of play a little bit of everything. I actually have a handout, and if any of you would like to see it, that actually where I recommend a lot of pieces that have worked well here for us at A&M by various composers, I would be happy to share with you because I know I'm leaving out a lot of things that have happened, you know, or a lot of pieces and a lot of really, really great composers that we have played. And again, we play lots and lots of new music here. Probably, I would say 50% new music and 50% probably traditional things. We have a list of the Lincolnshires, the Holt suites. I can't believe how many of my students have never played the Holt suites when they come to school here. So that's a thing that needs to happen. And I'll never forget, you read the whole suite in E flat, and it reads down pretty well here with our players. And so, you know, they go, oh, this is going to be great. And then I remember my first flute player, after we got into that piece about 3 rehearsals, she goes, there is so much more to that piece than I ever would have thought when we read through that, you know. So any kind of music that makes them have that kind of experience, you know, I will play. I'm very careful about what I play with my students. My students know when music has a lot of meaning, and they also know when it does not. And while my students are so respectful, they would never say anything to me. I can tell in the way that they're always wonderful when we read something, but you can tell in the way they rehearse. Oh, I'm also a great fan of the music of Omar Thomas. I think he is a really fresh thing. We did one of his pieces last fall, and it really, really resonated well with the students and our audience. And we were actually working on another one for our last concert in April. And when I email my students, because luckily I have 80% of my wind symphony that's returning for the fall semester, I said, so if you had your way, which of these pieces will we program, you know, when we come back? The Omar Thomas piece was first place for pretty much everybody that we had. So I have, as we go through here, and I know we don't have very much time, and I have a lot more stuff I would love to say because I'm very wordy here. It's very important to have mentors. Don't be afraid to have somebody come in and listen to your ensemble. Don't be afraid to have somebody conduct your ensemble and you get away and listen. I found out that my rehearsals, I try to have guest conductors in every year with my ensemble. I also try to let my associates conduct my ensemble. It sounds totally different when I stand away from it than when I'm on the podium, you know? So don't be afraid. Make sure it's people you trust. I would also caution though about don't have a plethora of people because that starts confusing the students. You know, sometimes one says this, one says that, one says the other thing. The director of the ensemble is the one that should make the absolute decision when we go through. It's important that I think that you have some kind of warm up. There's different kinds of things you can do that. I think intonation is a thing that we all need to continue to work on. I have a lot of ideas about that. If you would like to see some more of those, I'm happy to share those with you guys. Again, I'm just kind of rolling through this thing. I think we have to be, you know, music, as we teach, we have to make sure that we teach both all of the technical things, the intonation, the playing everything together, the playing it, alignment, all those other kind of things, but we also can't forget the craft and the art. I don't think you can separate those, you know. I think there is nothing, you know, people get up there and they say, well, we're worried about the musicality and all those other kind of things, but there's nothing more musical than a wrong note or a wrong rhythm or something that comes. I tell my students, I said, we cannot have what I call technical distractions, which are intonation problems when we're not together, or anything that distract from what we're trying to do musically. So we try to always work on everything at the same time. And when I go out and I work with groups, I try to cover everything at the same time. What can I address that we're having a problem that's a technical issue through a musical solution as we go through? You got something?
Yeah. So Spencer is asking regarding music having a lot of meaning. I've seen a video of how University of Texas and A&M came together in 1999 to honor those lost in the bonfire. UT raising both school flags, then lowering the UT flags and leaving A&M flags raised. Can you discuss from a personal perspective the band's roles in bringing healing to the community?
Sure, I'll be happy to. For any of you guys that know anything about, Texas A&M and University of Texas, bitter rivals on the football field, anything. The University of Texas, has one of the finest band programs in the country. Jerry Junkin is a very good friend of mine. Paula Kreider, as you already told you about, all those guys over there. Scott Hanna, that's there now. Rob Carnahan. At the time all this happened, my good friend Kevin Setitol was the director, and the bonfire thing was such a big deal here. It's something that really created a lot of community within the students here at Texas A&M. It was something that had been going forever. It was truly, I came here in 93, so that was 99 when that happened. It was certainly the biggest tragedy that I had ever had to go through at a university that involved pretty much everything. And it changed a whole lot of things here when that happened that have never been quite the same. So as you can imagine, going through that week, it was very difficult emotionally on everyone, and thinking, okay, now we've got to play a football game, because that game was traditionally always a Thanksgiving game. And so we always had great respect for the Longhorn band. And usually, I had a chance, I would walk over and, go to their rehearsal if I could do that. But for some reason, I had no idea what they were going to do at halftime that day. They had not shared that with us in any way, what they were going to do. And for that classy thing that they did, everybody forgot about rivalries or anything. Everybody was just one family, of humanity for that. It truly was one of the classiest things I've ever seen. They did it so well. They did it so emotionally. And it's really interesting that you ask about that. So that you said that one of them lowered an A&M flag. When we played our last game, when they were leaving the Big 12, they had me come down on the field. The Longhorn band was going to march first, and the Aggie band was going to march second. And after the Longhorn band marched, they had that A&M flag framed, and they gave it to us. And it's in our music facility that we recently moved into. So it was healing in many ways, and while I'd always had great respect for all of my colleagues over there, that took everything to just an absolute another level. So just a couple of things. I'm just going to hit the top of these because I know we're going to have to wrap this up a little bit. Interpretation, technique, wonderful sound. All of this is something astonishing, but it's not enough. Interpretation, facades is everything. Pacing of dynamics, shaping phrases, musical direction to and from, architecture of the piece, all things we learned. Conducting, we talked a little bit about that. Don't be a time beat or a metronome. What can you show them through your conducting that's going to make them respond to you? And also a thing that I've learned, never let your ensemble not respond to your conducting. Because if you let them do it one time, they'll think it's okay, Student leadership, particularly, our marching band here is all based on Corps Cadet student leadership. Students are great teachers, and responsibility in your students instills a sense of ownership. Ours here, they teach all of our marching fundamentals. They do bus lists for trips. They do every kind of thing. It's a leadership lab. So I think the more that we can have them involved, the more. Parents, particularly if I was teaching in the public schools, anything that they can do so you can be the musical director, collect money before or after school, help you with uniforms, chaperones, or organize all that stuff. They need to make your life easier, particularly if you don't have any kind of administrative help. We talked a little bit earlier, record your rehearsal. Because of the multitude of everything that's going on, you'll be surprised what you hear sometimes when you go back, and record it maybe every Monday or something. Is it getting better? What's not getting better? Have your students listen to it sometimes. And then you've got to have mentors. I have been very fortunate, particularly through my relationship with the American Bandmasters Association, that I really got to meet some people. Jay Julian and his wife, Faye Julian, were wonderful friends to Jennifer and I. I'm very sad I met them later in my life and didn't have enough time with them. Jay Julian was a mentor that taught you how to be a great person. Besides being, somebody once called him probably maybe the most complete director of bands that maybe we ever had in our profession, because he understood about living life and treating people correctly, besides having a great brand program. When you say things about mentors, don't be afraid to have somebody come help your band before it's perfect, because I got news for you guys. It's never going to be perfect. We're going to try to get it as close as we can to perfect. And in that, we hopefully are going to achieve greatness. If it was perfect, you wouldn't need me or somebody else to come listen to it. Have your mentor listen to recordings or visit your rehearsals on a regular basis, particularly somebody that you trust. Ask the hard questions to them. We all want to be better teachers. I hopefully get a little bit better every year in refining my skills. I think about, you go back and you're listening to your recordings 20 years ago. Oh man, why did I do that? Well, as your musicianship develops and all of your different bag of tricks develop, then hopefully we all get better as we go through. So those are just some questions. And again, this all came about from a clinic that I used to do called Things That I Have Stolen from Others During My Profession. And if any of you would like to see the entire handout, because it was about 14 pages of stuff that I probably brushed on about 6 of it, to get through here, because I enjoy talking about these different things. It was a pleasure to be with you guys tonight. I know, Leif, that you were very instrumental in having me be on here this evening, and I sure thank you for having the trust in me to sit here for another hour on Zoom and have to listen to me tonight. I got a little thing here that they want me to read to you, which says, tune in weeknights, Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays at 8, 7 Central to watch Keeping the Beat live. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and don't forget to like and share. Our next show is Monday, June 8th, and our presenter will be Kim McLeborn. Presenters who wish to host an episode should apply via tnmea.org. And thanks for watching. I hope all of you guys have a wonderful evening. And if I can help you in any way, please reach out. And I wish you the best as we continue to get our music programs hopefully back to normal as soon as possible. Have a great evening.